So if the other angle to this whole issue is kind of a manifestation of the Dunning-Kruger effect, why is it that so many people have an opinion that differs from the scientific community? Do they not know what the scientific community believes, or do they reject it? And if they reject it, they're essentially saying that they know better than the experts. And that is such an arrogant position. You know what I mean? Which, of course, usually they're the ones accusing others of being arrogant. So what I like to do is ask people to consider an area of their expertise. If they're a mechanic, you know, what do you think about your average customer and their knowledge about how to be a good mechanic? Well, they would know from experience that it's terrible. You know, if you're not an expert in something, your knowledge about it is probably pretty wanting. Because you're just absorbing what you can from the culture, and TV and media, you know, which is incredibly inaccurate about any area that's even remotely sophisticated. So there is, this is like the Dunning-Kruger effect, where you don't even know enough to know how little you know, or how much of a gap there is between your knowledge and the expert knowledge. So, and I get that a lot when I talk to people like, for example, who reject evolution. They have no idea. They have no idea how much information evolutionary biologists have that they don't have. You know, the knowledge of whatever, everything, the genetics, the fossil evidence, all the different lines of evidence, and how detailed and technical it is. And they're sort of shooting from the hip based upon very superficial misinformation about the area, and think that they actually know better. Like, oh, those scientists are stupid. They don't know what they're talking about. Really? Really? How many technical journals have you read and understood? You know? If you could really get them to understand that, the only, I think, reasonable conclusion is that you need to be humble, which, you know, I know we've said before that skepticism and critical thinking is largely an exercise in humility. You know, people have an overconfidence bias. You have to fight against that. You have to fight against your own personal Dunning-Kruger effect. You have to assume you lack information. You should assume that experts know things you don't know, and have a baseline sort of respect for a consensus, you know, a robust consensus of relevant experts. And if you think there's something wrong with the consensus and you have a lot of work to do, you shouldn't reject it casually and assume that you know better than they do, because chances are you're going to be wrong.
That has to go hand in hand with an appreciation of expertise, though, too, because to say, it's important to be able to say, I don't know.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you get, for example, in climate change, politicians that love to say, well, I'm not a scientist, which is then followed by, but this is what I think about da-da-da-da. So I think it's important to be able to say, I don't know. But you know what? You know who does know? This scientist who's an expert in this thing. And I'm going to defer to them. I think that's a difficult thing to sort of train or to teach, but it's like super important to say it's okay not to know, but it's just as okay or even more important than to defer to people that actually do. And what's nice is you have the ability to determine if someone is an expert. Like that, you know, that shouldn't be this mysterious thing. Is someone an expert on a certain subject or a certain topic?
Yeah. Although that is getting trickier because there are a lot of fake experts out there.
That's true too. But
yeah, that's true.
But
that's why you have to go a little bit beyond that to say, okay, you know, there's a consensus of experts that I'm reading about in recognized academic, you know, outlets, you know, things that this is not some narrow ideological group. This is a generic scientific organization that, you know, generally should be trusted, like the AAAS. The AAAS doesn't have any ideological axe to grind. It's just a scientific organization. You know, it's a prestigious scientific organization. So, you know, if they come to a conclusion on something, you should at least take it seriously, and it should at least give you pause, you know? And you shouldn't just dismiss it out of hand. Mm-hmm. But again, that's why I used, like, your own area of expertise. It doesn't matter what it is. You're an expert on fishing lures. It doesn't matter. Whatever you're an expert on, just think about the gap between your knowledge and the average person in the street. Well, as ignorant as you think they are, that's how ignorant you are about everything else in the world.
It's like, think of any time something is shown in a film or on TV that
you happen to know about
and
it.
you happen to know about it, you will, every single person, whether it's a mechanic or making fishing lures or a makeup artist or an astronaut, they will go, oh, jeez, really? No, that's not how it works. Every time.
Every time.
Very rarely does a film come out where it's like, wow, that was really spot on. That was really well done. Those are the exceptions. So that's a great way to think of it. Like whenever you see your expertise done in popular culture, it's usually done wrong. And why? Because you know a lot about it. Well, you know that little about everything else on the planet.
Everything else.
Yeah, that's great. Right.
So that's one thing you talked about. Like, what did we learn in the last 10 years? What were the experience? I've become much more humble, I think, in the last 10 years. I think I have
this
a better
is you being humble?
For, really? I mean, I say I don't know about a lot of things. Like even I used to get into discussions and feel free to have an opinion about lots of things I had no business having an opinion on. Now it's more like if we're talking about something even in politics or whatever, it's like I'll much more quickly get to the conclusion. You know what? Neither of us have any idea what's going on here.
Right.
The real information, we are so far from it. What we're getting fed in the media is probably so far from what's really going on. I think that we just have to agree that neither of us know what the real answer is here and just rather than substituting our ideological answer.
Yeah, so George, that's Steve's version of humble. I don't know shit, but you don't know shit either.
Yeah, that's right.
That's the U2 fallacy.
Over the past, sure, I could say 20 years, but the podcast is really when things started to take off with our education and our real respect and understanding of skepticism and everything. And it took quite a while to get to the point where it's not painful at all to say, I don't know, or to be wrong. Those two things are actual skills because they take time. You can't just say, I'm going to not care about these two things or I'm not going to, care that I'm wrong and I'm not going to have a problem apologizing. They are hard and you have to learn how to do it.
I love hearing from the experts.
It's true. That's also part of the humbling is whatever we talk about, there's somebody who's a world expert on it, did their thesis on it or whatever, and they will show us the gap between us making a sincere effort to understand something and what the experts really understand. We get slapped in the face with that every week just about, and it's a great experience. That humbling experience is awesome.
Well, Steve, watching you give your talks about memory in the last, 5 years since I've known you guys, I've seen you do a number of sort of different talks about memory. And that's something that's completely changed in me, where I will never, ever again say, I swear this is what happened.
Yeah.
I will always say, to my best memory, this is what happened, or this is what
the narrative my brain is constructed for me.
I cannot, but
these are the series of pictures.
But I could be wrong. I am completely remembering it this way, but I acknowledge that could be completely false and probably is completely false. Like I never would have said that 10 years ago. It would have been this is how I'm remembering it and you're wrong. So we need to make those changes in ourselves over time. So it's nice to be able to do that.